Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a whole stack of material right here digging into a topic that pops up in headlines sometimes and is, frankly, often pretty confusing.
That's right. We're taking a deep dive into what's known as sovereign citizenship. What exactly does someone mean when they claim that status? Why do they claim it?
And I guess the big question is, how does the actual legal system respond? Does it work?
Exactly. And we've pulled from some really key sources for this. We have information from the FBI, some analysis from the Southern Poverty Law Center,
Right, and also court cases. There's a major federal one, United States v. Banabi.
and we're looking really closely at the very public state of Wisconsin v. Darrell E. Brooks Jr. trial. We even have some insights from Judge Jennifer Doro, who presided over that.
So our mission today is really to cut through the jargon, the confusion, using this material. We want to understand the core claims of this ideology.
And then starkly contrast them with the legal reality, what judges and courts actually do every day. And that Brooks case study, it really brings it into focus.
And, if you want the headline right up front, here's the kind of surprising truth based on everything we looked at. Sovereign citizen arguments. They're almost completely rejected by courts, pretty much every single time.
Yeah, overwhelmingly. So let's jump in.
Okay, so where do we even start? What is sovereign citizenship? You mentioned it's part of a broader anti-government ideology.
Exactly. Think of it as one flavor, maybe within a larger set of beliefs where people just reject government authority. It's often linked with folks who protest taxes or, subscribe to various conspiracy theories.
They fundamentally question the legitimacy of laws and regulations then.
That's the core of it, yeah. And groups that track these movements, like the FBI and the Southern Poverty Law Center, they consistently highlight this connection in their reports.
Okay. And what are the actual claims they make? Like, what would you hear someone saying if they identified this way?
Well, the typical claims are pretty sweeping. Adherents often believe they're immune from laws most of us see as standard.
Things like paying taxes, obeying traffic laws.
Right? Even facing criminal charges. They genuinely seem to believe they've found some kind of loophole, a way to opt out of the social contract, the legal system that applies to everyone else.
And they use some, unique language to explain this, don't they? Like talking about being a flesh and blood human versus some kind of separate corporate straw man identity.
Yes, that pseudo-legal jargon is a real key marker. The idea, and it sounds pretty bizarre, is that when you're born, or maybe you get a social security number, the government creates this legal fiction, the straw man, or corporate entity.
And that's what the laws apply to, in their view.
Exactly. They believe they, the real living person, are somehow distinct and sovereign, not subject to jurisdiction over that legal fiction.
It definitely sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
It does. But this concept, you'd be surprised, it's actually pretty widespread in these fringe circles.
Okay, so that's the theory. But theory meets reality, often pretty dramatically, in a courtroom. And the state of Wisconsin v. Darrell Brooks Jr. case is probably one of the most public examples we've seen of this playing out.
It really is. I mean, this was the incredibly tragic case from 2021 where Darrell Brooks drove an SUV through the Waukesha Christmas parade.
Horrific.
Absolutely. And during his 2022 trial for those acts, you might remember, he fired his legal team.
Right, and chose to represent himself.
And that's when he began using these classic sovereign citizen arguments.
Yeah, watching parts of that trial, it was clear he was leaning really hard on those specific claims you mentioned earlier. He kept insisting the court didn't have jurisdiction over him.
Basically arguing the court didn't have the authority to even hear his case or try him.
And he wouldn't answer to the name Darrell Brooks, right?
Yeah.
Claiming that name was the legal fiction, not him, the real living man.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
And this is precisely where you see the legal system just firmly shut down these ideas. Judge Jennifer Doro, who handled that trial with, frankly, incredible patience.
She really did.
She repeatedly explained in very clear terms that these arguments just had no basis in law, none whatsoever.
And her rulings weren't just her personal opinion, were they? They reflect established legal precedent.
Yeah, absolutely, not just her opinion. There's that major federal case from 2011 we mentioned, United States v. Banabi. In that one, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals looked at these sovereign citizen defenses.
And they didn't hold back, did they?
Not at all. They flat out ruled that these arguments are, and this is the direct quote, utterly meritless. That's incredibly strong language for an appeals court.
Utterly meritless.
And they went on to say these claims have no conceivable validity in American law. I mean, that's about as definitive as it gets legally. It's like a stake through the heart of these arguments.
A pretty clear legal smackdown.
You could say that. But, despite Judge Doro citing the correct law, trying to keep the proceedings on track, Brooks just persisted throughout his trial.
He did. He was constantly disrupting things, wasn't he? Filing tons of documents.
Page after page of nonsensical stuff filled with that sovereign citizen rhetoric, and he kept repeating variations of, I am a man, not a person, trying to make that distinction stick.
Yet, despite all that disruption, all the outlandish claims, the trial moved forward.
It did. Judge Dora maintained control of her courtroom, she followed legal procedure, and at the end of the day, Brooks was convicted on all counts related to the terrible events in Waukesha.
So it's really important then to zoom out, like you said, and understand why this whole topic matters. It's not just strange courtroom antics, is it?
No, definitely not. It's not harmless eccentricity or just theater, even though it might look that way sometimes.
Because the consequences are real, sometimes very serious.
That's right. First, these arguments, they just massively clog up the court system. They waste valuable time, resources.
For everyone involved, right. Victims, defendants who might have actual legal defenses, judges, court staff.
Exactly. And maybe more chillingly, the ideology can escalate into violence. We saw that in the FBI intelligence bulletin from 2011.
What did that say?
It classified some sovereign citizen adherents as potential domestic terrorism threats, specifically pointing to those who become aggressive or non-compliant when dealing with law enforcement or the courts.
Okay, that's serious.
Yeah.
It is worth noting, though, that the material we looked at also emphasizes that, while that potential for violence exists.
Most people claiming sovereign status aren't violent.
Right. That's an important distinction the sources make.
Agreed. It's crucial. But even when there's no violence involved, pursuing these, made-up legal strategies has huge negative impacts.
Like we saw with the Brooks case.
Exactly. Relying on legal fictions instead of mounting a legitimate defense based on actual law, it completely undermines a defendant's own rights. And it just obstructs the whole justice process.
Because really, at its core, the legal system operates on this basic principle, doesn't it? You can't just opt out. You can't decide the laws don't apply to you because you disagree or have a different belief system.
Precisely. Our Constitution guarantees fundamental rights, due process for everyone, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's bedrock. But that framework doesn't give any individual the power to unilaterally decide, okay, this law applies to me, but that one doesn't. Or to invent their own rules for how the court system is supposed to work.
So when you look at all this material, the central tension it really explores is this.
Yeah.
Is sovereign citizenship some kind of clever, hidden legal loophole that lets you escape government authority?
Or is it, as courts consistently find, just, wishful thinking, built on a kind of legal fantasy?
And the Darrell Brooks case, tragic as the circumstances were, serves as such a stark real-world demonstration of that, doesn't it?
Undeniably. It shows that personal ideology, no matter how strongly you believe it, it just doesn't override established law. It doesn't trump the authority of the courts.
So here's something to think about, maybe. Given that any functioning legal system needs some kind of shared framework, right? Some agreed upon rules to even exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the broader implications for society when individuals start claiming the right to just unilaterally decide which laws apply specifically to them and reject the whole system's jurisdiction entirely? What happens then?
That's a really profound question to consider.
Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.